Brasilia, the architectural wonder built from scratch to symbolize Brazilian democracy. But today the clear-up continues after the storming and trashing of those very seats of power by supporters of former President Jair Bolsonaro, whom they believe has been unseated unjustly. An act of defiance against President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva, who was sworn in last week following an October election that divided Brazil. Late last night, Lula inspected the damage caused to the presidential and judicial buildings, flanked by cabinet members and journalists. And in a meeting with governors, representatives and Supreme Court justices, he wanted to show he is firmly in charge and vowed to find and punish those responsible. And he reminded the country about its not-so-old military dictatorship times, criticizing his own army.
Everyone here is aware of the number of people that were tortured for not agreeing with the military regime. And now there were people freely calling for a coup in front of the military headquarters. And none of them have done anything. No general stood up to say, this can't happen, it's forbidden to ask for that. It gives the impression that there were people who liked it when the people were calling for a coup.
According to Lula, more than 1,500 people who took part in the attack have been detained and will remain in jail until the investigation is completed. Across the country, people have also taken to the streets, demanding retribution for the perpetrators. In Brazil's biggest city, São Paulo, thousands line Paulista Avenue in support of their new president.
These people have to be punished. The bosses have to be punished. Those who are giving money have to be punished. Brazil is much bigger than what they showed there. Those people do not represent Brazil. We represent Brazil.
The fight now is to support the government that was democratically elected, and we are not going to leave the streets. That is the message.
Bolsonaro himself is currently in a Florida hospital, a social media post stating he was admitted with abdominal pain. He's yet to admit defeat in October's tight-fought election, but has denied responsibility for encouraging the rioters, although he has condemned the attack. Back in Brasilia, families of the detainees wait outside the police academy, where more than 1,200 people are still locked in. All those I spoke to voted for Bolsonaro and believe without any proof the elections were stolen. I asked one family member if he believed Lula did not win the elections.
I don't believe he did. I think they put him there. There is a new world order that wants to dominate the whole planet.
And I asked what he thought of the violence on Sunday.
I am against it. As a teacher and a leader of opinion, I will never support acts of violence.
The detainees are being slowly transferred to a local jail. But with no clear organized protest movement and with so many under arrest, the authorities face a tough challenge dealing with such an enormous criminal investigation run by a government that has only just got into power.
Guillermo Galdos reporting. Well, our foreign affairs correspondent Sikandar Kamani was in Brazil during that tense election last year. And Sikandar, you've been speaking to Bolsonaro's supporters today. What have they been telling you?
That's right, Matt. Let's dive into the Bolsonarista universe, because they see themselves not as aggressors, but as victims. And they're convinced that Lula has stolen this election and that he's going to transform Brazil into a communist state, despite there being no evidence of that. And the reason that they only took to the streets after Lula had been inaugurated was because they were convinced that up until the last moment, there would be a military coup preventing him from taking power. Now, as for the violence and destruction that we saw on Sunday, many are dismissing it as the work of left-wing infiltrators. Now, it does seem that discussions within the far right even were revolving primarily around a peaceful takeover of the areas around these government buildings. But this is clearly an attempt to respond to the public backlash against Bolsonaro supporters that we're now seeing. Interestingly, one Bolsonaro supporter that I was talking to today gave me some details about how plans to converge on Brasilia was drawn up on the messaging app Telegram using code words and innocuous names for groups like Brazilian Cooking, for example, to avoid detection by the Brazilian authorities.
OK, and social media, is an incredibly important part of this. It all sounds a little bit like what happened in Washington 2 years ago on January the 6th.
That's right. Social media is a key to this because misinformation online played a huge role in Bolsonaro's rise to power. Conspiracy theories were spread and shared online throughout this latest election campaign. I've been speaking to one academic about the response of social media companies.
So they did do more than they used to, because especially Google, YouTube really did nothing or barely nothing before this year. So this year, last year, they demonetized some of the big far-right channels. So they are doing more, but I think one of the bottlenecks there is definitely WhatsApp. And for sure, a lot of these organizations for these protests, for this movement, goes through WhatsApp, and WhatsApp, of course, is much more difficult to moderate.
Well, diving a bit further down this rabbit hole, one Bolsonaro supporter told me what really energized the movement was what he considered a secret message held within Bolsonaro's last live address as president. And in that, just as the live stream's about to end, someone appears to say the word selva. And it's a Portuguese battle cry that the protesters have adopted as their own kind of slogan in recent days. It's not clear why it was said. Bolsonaro has distanced himself from events on Sunday. But just as people are still poring over what led up to January the 6th in Washington, they're going to be poring over what led up to January the 8th in Brasilia for some time to come.
Sikandar, thanks very much indeed.